The peak rut is represented by the highest percentage of does receptive to breeding, all in that same time. Welcome to my channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. So I will start off by explaining that the whitetail rut will occur at different times throughout the year in different areas, mainly influenced by photo period, and that would be when the light cycle becomes darker and darker and darker, and you start to see more and more days of darkness compared to light. So as you get closer towards winter equinox, that sort of thing, you'll see that you get much closer to 12 hours of day, 12 hours of light. So this photo period is very similar to what triggers a lot of flowers, plants to start dying off, producing their buds, depending on where they are, producing their flowers or producing their fruit. The majority of the time it's influenced by a photo period. Had the photo period not be in place, you would have varying things. So for example, some people will say, well, it was a late rut this year. The rut was 3 weeks late. Well, you may not have seen the rutting activity, but the rut was not 3 weeks late. Had the rut been 3 weeks late, the fawns would be born later into the spring, and they'd have a lot less likely chance of survival coming into the winter because they'd be 3 weeks behind. And the same works in the other direction. When people say, well, the rut was early this year. Had the rut been early by 3 weeks to a month, those fawns would be born 3 weeks to a month earlier. So there might still be snow on the ground, there might not be vegetation for the mom to get to provide milk, and that kind of stuff. So a lot of this varies on geography. Where I am, I'm in the northern portion of the whitetails range. So that's going to be a little bit different than, say, the guys in the southern states. But the principles of the rut and the timing of the rut pretty much stay consistent from geography zones. So you might see sooner rut in Florida, which is, I know that their hunting season begins in July or August or something like that. And then you go further into Illinois and you're starting to see a later rut might carry on. So in northern Canada, typically what you would consider the peak of the rut would be November 10th through till November 17th, in somewhere in those time frames. So essentially what happens as the light cycle starts to change and you start seeing shorter days and more longer periods of darkness, this triggers something within the white-tailed deer's brain. So you'll have females. Female will go into estrus. And when she goes into estrus, she lets out a scent, a pheromone, hormone, whatever you want to call it. And this scent attracts a buck, basically saying she's in season. So it could be comparable to a dog that goes into heat. When that female dog goes in heat, every male dog knows that female's in heat. So he's out seeking her. So early on in what people would call the pre-rut, the light cycle starts to change and the bucks and the does begin to change their behavior. You'll start to see bucks seeking out rubs, sniffing branches, licking branches. And what they're doing is they're rubbing parts up here of preorbital gland and nostril gland. I believe there's also preorbital in the nostrils. They're basically scent marking. It's kind of like using the community phone and just who's in the area, checking in, kind of almost equivalent to a dog peeing on a stump. And not so much in the territorial sense, but more who's in the area, as does begin to do the same thing, rubbing scent glands on their feet, rubbing their nostrils. You might even see a buck taking a stick, a branch, and putting it right up his nostril. And that's because he has all kinds of scent glands there, and in the forehead there's what is called preorbital glands. They let out an oil or wax that's basically a hormone letting them off know who's in the area, which deer are potentially in season, what's going on. So as that period begins, you start to see what people call the pre-rut. So as the pre-rut kicks off, you start to see what people talk about a bell-shaped curve. So as those days slowly become shorter, there's less light, and it becomes darker, the rut gets up higher. So basically what it's done is it's triggered something in the whitetail's brain. So when the pre-rut, you'll start to see does going into estrus. So I'm going to try to use analogies that are pretty tangible for somebody to use. So I would look at it like this. You and your buddies head out to the bar, and you're with 20 buddies, and all of them are single. And there's 50 women at the bar, and one of those women is single. what you will notice is that single woman will be clearly being pursued by all your single male friends. So let's say, for example, the woman's at the pool table or she's by the VLT machine. Well, there's a good chance that most of those 50 single guys are going to be making stops over to that pool table to try their luck with her, talk to her, chat her up, that kind of thing. And that's essentially what you're seeing when the rut begins. So early on in the rut, you may have in, say, a 4-mile area, let's say 20 does and 10 bucks all residing within the same area. One of those 20 does will go into estrus. So those bucks are all going to be seeking her out, all sniffing her out, because she's basically putting a scent in the forest that there's a single gal around, and whoever's interested is going to go and pursue her. So slowly, as what begins to happen, as the rut kicks up, and people what we call peak rut, as your bell curve begins to increase, you slowly start to see more and more does entering estrus in the same window of time. So let's just say, for example, you have November 5th. Well, by the end of October, early November, people start saying, I've seen a lot of chasing. Well, that's kind of what you're seeing, is you're seeing chasing because you have a smaller amount of does in estrus, so essentially ready for breeding in heat, which you want to call whatever you want to call it, going into that cycle early on. So as the rut progresses and people start to say what they call peak rut, more and more of these does go into estrus at the same time. So let's say, for example, by November 10th, well, you're saying, well, the rut's really on. I've been driving to work and I'm seeing dead does on the side of the freeway. I'm seeing dead does on the side of the freeway highway. On the way back, I'm seeing bucks chasing does right across the street. So when the rut's on and these bucks are really pursuing the does, you can see it's because of the proximity and the readily availableness of those does in the area. So what I'm saying about the proximity and the readily availableness is, as you reach that peak rut, as people would call it, you're starting to see more and more does going into estrus at the same time. So as they describe the bell curve, it starts out slow and it slowly ramps up. So around the peak rut, which I said, it will vary slightly in geography, typically in the northern regions around November 10th to November 17th. As you reach that peak rut, there's more and more does entering estrus at the same time. So we'll go back to the analogy of the pool table and the bar. There's 50 girls at the bar and there's 50 guys at the bar. Now, earlier on in the pre-rut, like we talked about, there was only one girl who was single. Well, now of those 50 girls that are single, now of those 50 girls sitting at the bar, sitting around by the pool table, 30 of them are single. And you still got your 50 buddies hanging out there. Well, those girls are going to be all around the bar. And those guys don't have to go very far to find a single girl. So don't expect all those guys to be standing at the pool table. That one single girl before who was at the pool table who had all the attention, these guys are all dispersed now. And this is very much the same as what goes on with the bucks. They don't have to go very far in the peak rut. And the peak rut is represented by the highest percentage of does receptive to breeding all in that same time frame. So let's say between November 10th to November 17th around here seems to be about what people call a peak rut. These bucks are all over the place. He's traveling day and night. He's breeding one doe for their period of 24 to 48 hours when they're receptive. And when she's done, he's moving on to the next one. He's scent chasing. That's why you're starting to see bucks scent check, sniffing corners, working edges, working field edges, ditches, those kind of things that are corridors for receptive does that are leaving their scent out. So as you're in that peak rut, a lot of people will say, well, it's the best time to get out. Most rifle seasons open in the peak rut. It is your highest probability of seeing a buck just because of how many does are in heat in the area. They're spreading their scent. The spikers are cruising. The average size bucks are cruising. Mature dominant bucks by that point, and just because the buck is dominant doesn't mean he's the most mature. The older buck may not be as dominant, but he's had his years of breeding in already, so he might settle for easier to get doe. A lot of those bigger dominant bucks, though, they will be locked down. So for that 24 to 48 hours, he will not leave that doe's side, or multiple does in some cases, and he will breed her for 24 to 48 hours, and then he'll break off and disperse. So as we start to get into the tail end of the rut, so now we're past, say, the 17th of November, and it starts to dip back down again. You're seeing less and less of does in estrus at that time. So we'll go back to the bar analogy. You might go in that bar with 50 single dudes, and those 50 girls there, only 10 of those girls are single now. So those dudes are still working around, but there's nowhere near as many single women in that area. So those guys are going to have to go search them out. A lot of them have been bred already, and they're not going to go back into estrus till next year. So by that point, you're in the tail end of the rut. And in my opinion, the tail end of the rut and the pre-rut, are, in my opinion, are better times to try to actually shoot a mature deer, as they're not locked down and they're a little bit more back into traveling corridors and scent checking and that kind of thing. As when the peak rut kicks up, a lot of that tactics that you used in the pre-rut, they go out the window. Some of them stay the same, but the pattern of the buck has changed. He's not going from food to cover. He's not even concerned about food. He might lose 20% of his body weight just over the rut, just from chasing and breeding the whole time. So after the rut's done, we'll see it slowly keeps down, and let's say by the end of November, early December, you start to see barely any rutting activity. There is something that will happen that people call the second rut, and the second rut is essentially yearling does or does from the year previous who are going into estrus. So for biological reasons or maturity reasons, they weren't able to go into estrus in the peak with all the other females. They're going into estrus on the second rut, as people would call it. And it's generally yearlings or younger does. They're going into their estrus cycle. So now those does will come receptive. If you have a season open, that is a good time to go out and try to get on another buck, because they will be searching. So that's the whole video. I tried to keep it kind of condensed. That's just my opinion on it. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of an explanation for guys that might be new hunters. Hunters never had explained to them before, that sort of thing. Though I know it can be challenging if you're getting out first and you've never been deer hunting, or you're just getting into it and you hear a lot of stuff. A lot of people are reluctant to give you information. I'm not tooting my own horn, but I'm pretty good at what I do as far as those go. I did get this one on Wednesday. It'd be November 5th. This is a large body buck. He'd probably be he's well into the 200-pound range. I'm going to start butchering him up right away. He's been hanging for a few days. It's pretty cold in here. I'd say probably 250 pounds, which is common weight for the bucks up here in the north. Pretty big, mature 5x5 or 5x6. Sorry, I got him in archery season, so he's very close to hitting Pope and Young. I scored him myself. My rough score comes in anywhere from 120 to 125, 124. I think he's just barely making Pope and Young. This is my third Manitoba archery record that I have on file. With that said, I believe you need 100 inches to hit an archery record, and to be fair, 100 inches in an archery season, if you do that, you're probably doing pretty darn good. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Try to keep more content coming. I'll try to keep making more videos. If you like the stuff you see, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.